Every Tuesday morning at exactly 9 o'clock, my daughter called and asked me the same question. Dad, did you take your pills yet? For 6 months, I always told her the truth. I said, not yet, sweetheart, give me 20 minutes. But this past Tuesday, something felt wrong the moment the phone rang, and an instinct I hadn't felt since my days on the factory floor told me to say something else. So I lied. I told her yes, I'd already taken them, all of them, right on schedule. That single lie is the only reason I'm sitting here telling you this story today. What I discovered in the hours after that phone call unraveled a plan that had been building against me for over a year, and it forced me to become a man I didn't recognize. Before I go on, let me know where you're watching from down in the comments. And if you've ever had someone underestimate exactly how sharp you still are, hit like and subscribe, because this one's for you. My name is Walter. I'm 63 years old, and for 31 years I ran the maintenance department at a paper mill outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin. I know machines. I know how a system is supposed to run when every part is doing its job. And I know within about 10 seconds when something in that system has started to fail, even before the gauges show it. That instinct kept men alive on my watch for 3 decades. I never imagined I'd need it inside my own house, against my own blood. My wife Carol died 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless, gone in 11 weeks from diagnosis to the funeral home. After that, the house we'd raised our daughter in, a modest 3-bedroom rancher on Birchwood Lane that I'd re-shingled myself twice and rewired with my own 2 hands, stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a waiting room. I rattled around in it. I made coffee for 2 out of 40 years of habit and poured half of it down the drain. I am not a man who complains, so I want to be clear that I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because it matters to what happened next. My daughter's name is Renee. She's 34, married to a man named Curtis who sells commercial insurance, and up until Carol passed, I would have told you Renee and I were close in the ordinary way a father and daughter are close. Birthdays remembered, Christmas dinners, the occasional Sunday phone call that ran maybe 10 minutes before one of us had somewhere to be. Nothing more, nothing less. But 2 months after the funeral, the Tuesday call started. 9 a.m., sharp, every single week, and always the same opening line. Dad, did you take your pills yet? I want you to understand why that question sounded like love to me at first. After Carol died, my blood pressure went haywire from the stress, and my doctor put me on a small daily regimen, nothing dramatic, a beta blocker, and a low-dose blood thinner because of a minor arrhythmia they'd caught on a routine EKG. Renee said she worried about me being alone in that big house with nobody to remind me. I thought, what a good girl I raised. I told my neighbor, Frank Delgado, a retired postal worker who's lived across the street from me for 22 years, how lucky I was to have a daughter who checked on her old man like clockwork. Frank just nodded slow, the way he does when he's chewing on something he doesn't want to say out loud yet. The calls never varied. 9 o'clock. The pills question. Then a few minutes of small talk about the weather or Curtis's job. Then goodbye. It became the metronome of my week. I set my coffee down at 8:55 and waited for the phone like it was appointment television. For 6 months, whether I'd taken the pills at 8 or was planning to take them at 9:15, I told her the truth, because why on God's green earth would I lie to my own daughter about my heart medication? Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I'd woken up with a head cold, nothing serious, but I hadn't slept well and I was slow getting out of bed. By 8:50, I still hadn't touched my pill organizer, which sits on the kitchen windowsill next to a photograph of Carol on our wedding day. The phone rang right on time. Renee's voice came through, warm as always. Dad, did you take your pills yet? I opened my mouth to say the truth, that I hadn't, that I was running behind, and that's when I glanced out the kitchen window above the sink. There was a car parked 2 houses down that I didn't recognize. A gray sedan, nothing dramatic about it, except that it was backed into the spot facing my driveway instead of pulled in forward like every other car on that street parks. And I could see, even from that distance, a shape behind the wheel that hadn't moved in the several seconds I'd been standing there. 31 years of watching machinery for the one part that's out of sync teaches you to notice things like that. A car facing the wrong way. A driver sitting still at 9 in the morning with nowhere obvious to be. Something cold moved through my chest. And before I understood why, I heard myself say, yes, sweetheart. Took them 20 minutes ago, right on schedule. I don't know what made me lie. I want to be honest with you, whoever's listening to this. It wasn't a plan. It was the same gut instinct that used to tell me a bearing was about to seize before the machine ever made a sound. Renee said, "Good. That's great, Dad. Glad to hear it. Love you. Talk next week," and hung up. Ordinary as always. But I stood at that window for another full minute, watching that gray sedan not move, and the cold feeling in my chest didn't go away. I want to slow down here and tell you what my week actually looked like after that, because none of it hit me all at once. It came in pieces, the way a crack spreads through a foundation slab, invisible at first, and then one day you notice the door doesn't close right anymore, and you realize the damage has been happening under the surface the whole time. 3 days after that phone call, I had lunch with Frank Delgado on his back porch, the way we do most Fridays. I mentioned the strange car, half joking, saying maybe Curtis had hired somebody to keep an eye on the neighborhood. Frank went quiet in that way he does, and then he asked me a question that stopped my fork halfway to my mouth. He asked if I'd noticed my mail was coming later than usual, and whether anything looked open when it arrived. I hadn't noticed, because why would I? But once Frank planted that seed, I started paying attention the way I used to walk a factory floor. Eyes moving, cataloging everything, saying nothing. And what I found over the following 2 weeks made my stomach turn in a way it hadn't since the day the doctor told me about Carol's diagnosis. My bank statement, which usually arrived on the 3rd of the month, showed up on the 9th, and the envelope had a faint crease along the seal that hadn't come from my letter opener. Inside, I found a $200 cash withdrawal from an ATM in Appleton, 40 minutes from my house, on a day I never left Green Bay. Small enough that I might have shrugged it off as a bank error if I hadn't already been looking. Then I found a second one, then a third, spread out over 2 months, each one small, each one exactly the kind of amount a person takes when they're testing whether anybody's paying attention. I called the bank. The withdrawals had all been made using my debit card number, no physical card required, the kind of transaction you can do with the numbers alone if you have them memorized or written down somewhere. I asked myself who had those numbers. Carol had known them. I had known them. And 8 months earlier, when I'd been half out of my mind with grief and barely able to remember my own address, Renee had sat with me at this kitchen table and helped me set up online banking so I wouldn't miss any bills. I'd read her the numbers off my card myself, grateful, at the time, that somebody was taking care of me. I sat with that fact for 3 days before I let myself believe what it meant. Here's where I need to tell you about Curtis, because Curtis is the piece I didn't see coming. Curtis Aldrich, 36 years old, sold commercial insurance for a regional firm out of Milwaukee, and on paper, he was exactly the kind of steady, unremarkable son-in-law you'd want for your daughter. "Good job," drove a sensible truck, always shook my hand a little too firmly like he was trying to prove something. What I did not know, what I only learned because Frank's brother-in-law worked in commercial real estate and happened to mention it over a game of cards, was that the insurance agency Curtis worked for had quietly let him go 11 months earlier over what his former manager, off the record, called irregularities in a client trust account. No charges filed, no public record, just a quiet resignation dressed up as him leaving to start his own consulting practice. A consulting practice that, as far as anyone could tell, had exactly 0 clients. Curtis had been out of steady work almost the entire time. Renee had been calling me every Tuesday morning asking if I'd taken my pills. I didn't confront anybody yet. 31 years running, a maintenance crew teaches you that when you find one failed part, you don't shut down the whole line and start shouting, you trace the wiring first. Because the failed part is rarely the only problem, and it's almost never the real cause. So I started tracing. I drove to Appleton myself on a Wednesday and sat outside the branch where those ATM withdrawals had come from. I'm not ashamed to tell you I felt foolish doing it. An old man in a Buick with a thermos of coffee, watching a bank like it was a stakeout in one of Carol's mystery novels. But I was patient, because patience is the other thing 31 years on a factory floor teaches you. And on my third visit, I watched Curtis walk out of that branch, get into a gray sedan, and drive away. The same gray sedan that had been parked on my street the morning I lied to my daughter. I followed him. I'm 63 years old, and I followed my own son-in-law across 2 counties, hanging back 3 or 4 cars, the way I'd watched enough detective shows with Carol to know roughly how it's done, and I nearly lost my nerve twice. He drove to a squat brick office building on the edge of Appleton with a sign out front that read Lakeside Wellness and Assessment Center. I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes before he came back out, and I went home and did not sleep that night. The next morning, I called that office pretending to be a prospective patient's family member, an old trick, but an effective one when you've spent 3 decades talking your way past union reps and corporate auditors who didn't want to hear what you had to say. I learned that Lakeside Wellness specialized in geriatric psychological evaluations, the kind used by families petitioning a court for conservatorship over an aging relative believed to be a danger to themselves or unable to manage their own affairs. I sat in my kitchen with that information for a long time, staring at the pill organizer on the windowsill, at Carol's photograph next to it, and I felt something in my chest that wasn't quite anger yet. It was closer to the feeling you get in the seconds before a machine you've maintained for years finally, catastrophically fails, and you realize you saw every warning sign and told yourself it was nothing. Renee wasn't checking on my medication out of love. She was documenting a pattern. Every Tuesday call where I confirmed I'd taken my pills on time was, I now understood, being logged somewhere as evidence that a lonely, grieving widower was becoming forgetful, erratic, unable to manage basic self-care. The withdrawals from my account, small enough to seem like confusion rather than theft, were being built into the same story. And Curtis, out of work and apparently out of money, had found a doctor's office willing to help manufacture the paper trail needed to have me declared incompetent in hand control of my house, my pension, and everything Carol and I had built over 35 years of marriage to the two of them. I want to tell you that my first instinct was rage, but it wasn't. It was something quieter and colder. The same feeling I used to get walking the floor at 2 in the morning during a night shift, finding a machine running just slightly wrong, and knowing exactly, calmly, what needed to be done to fix it before it broke down entirely and took 3 other machines with it. I did not confront Renee. Not yet. I went to see a lawyer instead, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Denise Okafor who'd handled Carol's and my estate planning for years and had a reputation around Green Bay for not losing. I laid it all out for her. The withdrawals, the wellness center, the gray sedan, the 11 months of Curtis's quiet unemployment. Denise didn't blink. She told me 2 things I'll never forget. First, that a conservatorship petition requires a documented pattern of incapacity, and if I could prove the pattern had been manufactured rather than observed, the whole case would collapse and expose whoever built it to potential fraud charges. Second, and this was the part that steadied my hands, she told me that the fastest way to protect everything I own from a fraudulent competency claim was to prove, unmistakably and on the record, exactly how competent I was. So we built a case. I started keeping a written log of every Tuesday call, time-stamped, alongside my actual medication schedule verified by my pharmacy's automated refill records. Denise subpoenaed the ATM surveillance footage from the Appleton branch for the dates of those small withdrawals, and it showed, clear as day, Curtis's face at the machine, using a card that records confirmed was mine. I had a home security company install 2 discrete cameras, one covering the driveway and one covering the side door by the kitchen. The same kind of layered redundancy I used to insist on for critical machinery because you never trust a single sensor to catch everything. 3 weeks after I first lied about my pills, Renee called again. Tuesday, 9 a.m. Same as always. Dad, did you take your pills yet? I looked at the camera feed on my phone, showing an empty driveway, and I told her the truth for the first time in a month. I said, not yet, sweetheart. I'm running behind. There was a pause on the line, half a second too long, and then she said, take them now, Dad. Don't forget, and hung up faster than usual. I sat with that pause for the rest of the day. It told me everything. 2 days later, the driveway camera caught Curtis's gray sedan pulling in at 11 in the morning, a time I would normally be at the hardware store running my Thursday errands, a routine Renee knew as well as she knew her own name. He let himself into my garage using the code Carol and I had given them years ago for emergencies, and the side door camera caught him inside my kitchen for 6 minutes, standing at the counter where I kept my pill organizer and a small stack of unopened mail. He photographed both. He photographed my checkbook. And before he left, he opened my medicine cabinet and, using gloved hands, I noticed only when Denise slowed the footage down for me later, he swapped 2 of my blood pressure pills for something else, tablets he pulled from a small, unmarked bottle in his jacket pocket. I will tell you honestly that watching that footage was the closest I have ever come, before or since, to putting my fist through a wall. Denise moved fast after that. The swapped pills went to an independent lab, and the results came back showing they were not my prescribed medication at all, but a sedative, one that in an elderly man with an existing heart, arrhythmia could cause dizziness, disorientation, even a dangerous drop in blood pressure. Exactly the kind of symptoms that would look to an untrained eye or a paid-off doctor like the early signs of cognitive decline. It wasn't just about stealing my money anymore. It was attempted poisoning, dressed up to look like Alzheimer's. We took everything to the district attorney's office ourselves, rather than waiting to be dragged into a conservatorship hearing where I'd be forced to defend my own mind in front of a judge. The camera footage, the pharmacy records, the lab results on the swap medication, the ATM footage, the trail leading back to the doctor at Lakeside Wellness who, it turned out, had already been quietly flagged twice before by the state medical board for signing off on questionable competency evaluations in exchange for what investigators would later describe as consulting fees. Curtis was arrested on a Thursday morning at his own front door on charges of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, attempted poisoning, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Renee was named in the same investigation. I want to tell you that I felt nothing, that I was as cold and mechanical as I'd been standing in that kitchen tracing bank statements. But that would be a lie, and I've told enough of those in this story already. When they read Renee's name in that report, something in me that had been holding steady for 6 weeks finally cracked, and I sat alone in my truck in the courthouse parking lot for the better part of an hour before I could drive myself home. She called me from the county jail 2 days later, using her one allowed call, and I stood in my kitchen and let it ring. I watched the caller ID glow on the wall phone. The same phone that used to bring me 9 o'clock on Tuesdays like a small kindness, and I did not pick it up. I am not proud of how that felt. I am not ashamed of it either. I moved everything. The house, my pension, the small nest egg Carol and I had built dollar by careful dollar over 35 years, into an irrevocable trust with Frank Delgado's daughter, a family law attorney herself, named as an independent trustee, someone with no bloodline claim and nothing to gain except her professional fee. Half of it, when the time comes, goes to a veterans housing initiative here in Brown County because Carol spent the last 10 years of her life volunteering with returning vets, and it felt like the truest use of everything we built. The other half stays for my grandson, Renee's boy, an 8-year-old named Sammy who had absolutely nothing to do with any of this and deserves better than to inherit the wreckage his parents made. That money is locked away for his education, released to him directly when he turns 25, with no path back through his mother's hands. I still live in the house on Birchwood Lane. I still keep Carol's photograph on the windowsill next to my pill organizer, and every morning I take my medication the same time, no matter who's calling to ask. Frank and I have coffee on my porch most Fridays now instead of his, and he never once said I told you so, though he'd have earned the right to. The phone rang last Tuesday, 9 o'clock, right on schedule. An unfamiliar Wisconsin number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later that evening, I listened to it, and it was Renee's public defender asking if I'd be willing to speak on her behalf at sentencing. I sat with that message for a long time before I deleted it. Some machines, once the core parts have failed, you don't repair. You salvage what's still good, you protect what depends on you, and you let the rest go quiet. That's not cruelty. After 31 years keeping other men's equipment running safely, I know the difference better than most. It's just knowing when a thing is truly broken and having the strength to finally admit it.